Hi there. Danny Baker was never a personality who was on my radar when he rose to prominence, because a lot of what he did was on London regional radio and TV, and I just never got to see it. And I first noticed him when he presented a series of three discussions about pop music albums. Each episode was a different genre, and he had various guests on. And I was really impressed by his knowledge, encyclopedic knowledge of popular music, his enthusiasm, and his sharp wit. And another thing that I got from it was one of the guests was David Hepworth, and I was impressed with him and started reading his books, and I've read every one of his books, and I'll no doubt be reviewing them. He's a really prominent writer on popular music. So Danny Baker has now written a series of books which form his autobiography, and it's starting with Going to Sea in a Sieve, which detail his life. He grew up in Rotherhithe, near the Thames in London, a working class estate, and he had a glorious childhood. It was full of fun. He really enjoyed himself, played football, had a gang of mates and so on. And it reminded me of I saw a tribute presentation to Sean Connery, and he was being awarded some honour, and his old best friend from school days was introducing him, and he said, Sean and I grew up in deprived circumstances in a very rundown area of Edinburgh. He said, fortunately we didn't know it was deprived, and we had a great time running around as kids, and that's it. You know, kids can, if they're in a loving family, can have a great time. And Danny Baker was in a loving family, and his parents come over very, very well in the book. Particularly his dad, commonly known as Spud, who worked down on the docks and was a big strapping guy and was a real character. I mean, he shines through all the books. He's a guy you'd love to meet, larger than life, and had a few fiddles going on the docks, always bringing contraband home and selling it around the streets and the pubs, always dodging the rent man. There's a story in the book where the rent man calls, and Spud says to Danny, young Danny, go and tell him we're not in, we can't pay the rent, our parents are not in. So Danny opens the door and peers through, and oh, my dad's not in. He said, Rentman says, I know he's in. A bit of an argument. Doors flung open, and Spud grabs the rent man and says, if my lad says I'm not in, I'm not in. Oh, got it? So he's that type of guy. There's another story in the book, in one of the books, later on when Danny has become very, very prominent on TV, and he's in the Conran store in London buying furniture, him and his wife, very upmarket stuff, and Spud's with them, sucking his teeth, looking at the prices and so on. Anyway, they decide to buy a couple of items, and the salesman tots it up and gives him the price. And Spud leans in and goes, we don't need a receipt. He says, pardon? He said, we don't need a receipt. In other words, you know, we'll do a cash under the table at a discount. He's that type of guy. And Danny said he'd be walking down the street with Spud, and people would be calling out. Danny was prominent on TV at the time, had his own show and everything, but it was Spud they recognised, that type of guy. Anyway, apart from football, Danny got really into pop music, and his sister, who was a bit older than him, and her boyfriend used to take him to concerts, so he saw some of the stars at the time. And one of the shows was Hair, the musical, which people don't seem to talk about it now, but when it came out, it was absolutely groundbreaking. It was so popular, and the soundtrack, etc. But they went to see it, and Danny had the aisle seat, and one of the features of Hair was at the end, the cast stripped naked and ran up and down the aisles or stood in the aisles singing. And one of the male performers was right next to Danny, and his face was right at groin height, and he said it was very embarrassing with his sister sitting next to him. So there was things like that in the book. And his idol, while he was still at school, was David Bowie. And all his mates knew about this. And some of the older lads said, "Hey, Dan," he said, "that Bowie fella," he said, "I see him coming out of such an address quite nearby." So Danny, yeah. Anyway, Danny used to hang round stage doors, hoping to catch a glimpse of Bowie on the off chance he was appearing at various places. And he said it wasn't until years later, when he got to know David Bowie, he found out he was actually rehearsing at the place these lads had said. So Danny could have gone round and probably had a cup of tea with him. Anyway, he got a job in a record store, and I don't know if he memorised the record catalogues, but he's got such a knowledge of music. He can tell you everything about a record, the colour of the label, all the print on it, the album cover, what's on it, who made it, who made the tea in the studio. But in an interesting way, because he's so enthusiastic. He's not restricted to any one genre. He likes a lot of different things. Big fan of the Beatles, for example. But he was working in this record store, and it's a place where Elton John used to work, and he still used to pop in. And Mark Bolan used to pop in as well. It was another guy that Danny really idolized, and Mark Bolan actually gives him his sweater, which Danny wears until it disintegrates. Well, it disintegrated when his mother washed it, which he was devastated about. Anyway, the book goes right through the ups and downs of his life, and he had some downs. He got cancer of the throat, and he details that, and it's absolutely harrowing reading. It really is. But happy ending, comes through, and he's a cancer survivor. The books are being condensed into a TV series called Cradle to Grave, starring Peter Kay as Spud. Great casting. Really works. It's funny. It captures a lot of what's in the books, and I enjoyed it. It was a really good series. They only ever did one series. I hope they do more. The books and the TV series together give a really great portrait of a real character, a guy who is really a gem in the pop music culture and the broadcasting around pop music and popular culture in general.